The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a swarm of bees, drowning out the muffled rustle of papers and the occasional cough in the thick silence. Cameras clicked into place, red record lights glowing like tiny eyes in the dark. A thin sheen of sweat traced down the side of Katie Porter's temple, barely noticeable, yet betraying the heat of the moment. The room was packed, every seat filled, every pair of eyes fixed forward, not just watching, but waiting. Behind the rows of desks and glossy nameplates, the panel of senators and representatives leaned in. This wasn't just another hearing. This was the showdown that had been brewing for weeks. Katie Porter stood up slowly, her posture perfectly composed. Her signature whiteboard stood at her side like a sword. Her hand, steady but forceful, began writing numbers on it as she launched into her argument. Her voice, rich with urgency and steel, cut through the air, according to the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics report. She began, eyes narrowing. Food prices are up 2%. Energy bills have risen 9% year over year, and you're telling working families to just ride it out. She turned slightly, angling her body toward the man seated at the far end of the panel. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. sat back in his chair, unmoved. His hands were folded neatly in front of him, fingers interlaced. His face, marked by a lifetime of both privilege and battle, remained calm. He didn't interrupt, he didn't blink, and while Katie's voice rose, fueled by frustration and fact, Kennedy's stillness was almost unnerving. To those in the room, it felt like the clash of titans. But beneath the surface, behind the facts and posture, deeper stories were quietly at war of two very different lives, both shaped by struggle, both chasing justice in their own way. Katie Porter grew up in a tiny town in Iowa, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner to keep the heat on in winter. Katie had learned early that numbers weren't just numbers, they were life and death, rent, medicine. Food, every dollar was a decision. She had worked her way through Yale, buried under student loans, clawing toward her law degree with the tenacity of someone who couldn't afford to fail. Her dream wasn't fame, it was change, tangible, accountable change. Every statistic she read carried a memory. Her mom crying at the kitchen table, her younger brother skipping dinner so she could eat. Kennedy, on the other hand, was born into legacy, the son of a senator, nephew of a president, but that didn't mean his path was paved in gold. His voice, raspy and labored from a neurological condition, was the echo of years spent fighting, not only political battles but personal ones. He had lost family to violence, lived through scandal, addiction, and redemption. His calm wasn't indifferent. It was earned through the fire. Outside the capital, the country itself felt like it was unraveling. Inflation was more than a talking point. It was the silent thief in every home. Groceries that once fed a family of 4 now barely filled a single bag. Gas stations had become sites of dread. Parents rationed medicine, chose between childcare and overtime, between survival and dignity. Porter's report laid it all out in brutal detail. Her whiteboard now showed charts, arrows, and percentages. Corporations are padding their profits, she said, jabbing at the board. Blaming inflation, but their own earnings calls show record margins. People aren't struggling because of market forces. They're struggling because of greed. The crowd murmured. Reporters scribbled, and then came the pause. That deep, tension-filled silence where the air felt too thick to breathe. Kennedy leaned forward, his voice soft and deliberate. "No one here disputes that people are suffering," he said, "but when we shout at each other, we lose them in the noise." He paused, letting the words settle. His voice, though hoarse, carried a quiet power. "We keep talking about reports, numbers, projections, but we've forgotten the root. We've handed over entire industries, energy, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, to monopolies. It didn't happen last year. It happened over decades. Both parties, both sides. What we need is not more blame. We need to rebuild trust in the institutions that are supposed to serve the people." Katie's face shifted, just slightly. She wasn't yielding, but she was listening. Outside the chamber, two stories were quietly unfolding, both tied to the chaos inside. In Portland, a single mother named Maria was watching the hearing on her cracked iPhone as she waited in the food bank line. Her daughter had been sick for weeks, but Maria couldn't afford the antibiotics. She watched Katie and Kennedy not as politicians, but as symbols. One with fire, one with calm. She needed both. And in Kentucky, a lay-off coal miner named Travis sat on his porch, beer in hand, watching the same clip stream across his feed. He didn't care much for politics anymore. Too many promises, too many betrayals, but something in Kennedy's voice, the quiet, the refusal to fight fire with fire, kept him from scrolling past. Back in the chamber, the debate intensified. Subcommittee members started weighing in. Some attacked Katie's sensationalism. Others dismissed Kennedy's vagueness. But amid the chaos, something unusual began to happen. Katie stepped back from the whiteboard. Her voice dropped in volume. "I agree with you on one thing," she said. Eyes on Kennedy. "People are sick of being yelled at. They want answers, but calm doesn't mean compromise. We can't fix what we won't name. If we don't call it out, we just enable it." Kennedy nodded slowly. "And naming it isn't enough without a plan. What we owe them is more than anger, it's direction." In that moment, the battle shifted. It was no longer about who won the argument. It was about who could carry the pain of the people with enough strength to find the way forward. The hearing ended without a resolution, as most do, but the moment echoed far beyond the marble walls. Maria cried quietly that night, watching Katie's closing remarks on YouTube, her daughter asleep beside her. She didn't understand every policy term, but she felt seen, and for the first time in a long while, she felt heard. Travis went to bed with the sound of Kennedy's calm words still in his head. He hadn't voted in 12 years. But now maybe he'd start paying attention again. Weeks later, Katie and Kennedy met again, this time off-camera in a quiet D.C. cafe. No whiteboards, no microphones, just two people, tired but resolute. "I still think you let people off the hook too easily," she said with a small smile. "And I still think you scare the hell out of them," he replied, returning the smile. "But maybe," she said, sipping her tea, "that's exactly what we need, fire and calm, rage and reason, balance." He said they sat in silence for a moment, watching the city go by, both carrying the weight of the nation in different ways. Not as saviors, not as rivals, but as reflections of each other, and of a country still searching for its soul. Because, in the end, the story wasn't about a whiteboard or a calm response. It was about truth, and the courage to speak it, hear it, and carry it forward together. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real change begins.